I faked paralysis for 4 months and finally caught my wife attempting to kill me. You won't believe the betrayal I faced, the kind that makes you question everything you thought you knew about love. I spent 4 agonizing months pretending to be completely paralyzed, a prisoner in my own body, all to unmask the horrifying truth. My wife, the woman I swore to spend my life with, was meticulously plotting to murder me. What the hell happened next will shock you to your core. Every billionaire probably asks themselves the same thing. Would she still love me if I had nothing? So, when my wife and I got into a car accident, a thought, a chilling clarity, hit me. I knew exactly what I had to do. From the back of the ambulance, with sirens screaming, I texted my assistant, Isla, a code, silver. She understood. By the time we reached my private hospital wing, she'd already assembled the team. We had 50 paid actors, ready to help me convince the world I was a vegetable. The head of neurology? Cost me $2 million, but he sold the diagnosis perfectly. Every single nurse signed NDAs worth their entire mortgage. The doctor announced complete paralysis, and Elena's tears broke my heart. For a second, my carefully constructed world cracked, because her tears, they felt so real. She was my angel, flitting around me. She'd fluff my pillows, stroke my hair, whisper sweet, loving words. But the second we were alone, her face would go cold. Vegetables shouldn't take this long to die, she'd mutter, then practice her concerned face in the mirror. I heard her call her ex, Dean, once, standing right over me. The accident worked perfectly, she'd said. Prenups are void for disability. Oh, the calculated cruelty. She'd snap crying selfies for Instagram, checking her follower counts between fake sobs. My nurse, who was actually my head of security, was documenting everything. Elena performed grief like an Oscar-winning actress when my mother visited, then immediately called her lawyer. How much longer until I can pull the plug legally? She'd ask. My mother, who I'd secretly briefed, played the concerned mother-in-law perfectly, while Elena, meanwhile, circled dates on her calendar in angry red ink. Week 3. That's when Rick arrived. My best friend since we were 12. He walked into my room, and Elena, she locked the door. He's completely gone, she said, snapping her fingers in my face, shining phone lights in my eyes. Then, with a chilling smile, she said, "Watch this." She slapped me. Hard. Across the face. My ears rang, but I didn't flinch. Then again. Rick laughed nervously, but it died in his throat when she grabbed his hand and put it on her breast. He can't feel anything, she purred. We could make love right here. Rick pulled back, but she pushed harder. Come on, it's nothing we haven't done before. My security team, watching through hidden cameras, held their breath. She pulled Rick onto my bed. Imagine inheriting his empire through our kid, she whispered, unzipping his pants a mere 2 feet from my supposedly paralyzed body. Rick's resistance crumbled when she mentioned the billions. They made love in my bed. My bed, while I lay there, my eyes covered by a blindfold I could see out of. My lawyers wanted to end it right then. No, Blake, my lead counsel, said firmly. Without attempted murder on tape, she walks with half your fortune. We need her actually trying to kill you. Over the next 3 months, her cruelty escalated. She got me declared incompetent, using those same paid experts. My forensic accountant tracked 40 million flowing offshore while she practiced eulogies. He was the love of my life, she'd rehearse, adding tears on cue. Rick visited daily now for their scheduled sessions. Our kid's inheriting everything, he'd say as she wrote him, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. She'd describe my death during intimacy. First the facility, then a little morphine accident. Week 16. The pregnancy test came back positive. She waved it in my face. This is your friend's baby, but who's asking for DNA? She'd research untraceable poisons on my laptop, sitting on my legs. Paralyzed vegetables don't need passwords, she'd sneer, transferring another $1 million. She brought men home. Not just Rick. Dean, her trainer, strangers from bars. She'd use them in our bed, describing my helplessness. He watches everything but can't do a damn thing, she'd tell them, and they'd laugh, using my paralyzed body as a footrest. It was pure, sadistic torture. Month 4 brought the breakthrough. She met with the hospice consultant, taking detailed notes on injection sites and lethal morphine amounts. Then, she booked our vow renewal at my Napa estate, inviting 500 guests to watch her marry a vegetable. "Till death do us part won't take long," she told Rick, trying on the $100,000 dress. She'd eat elaborate dinners on my chest, deliberately spilling wine on my face. "Vegetables don't need dignity," she'd say, snapping photos for her private collection. The night before our wedding, she called Dean. "I've got 15 milligrams of morphine ready, between his toes where nobody checks. 20 minutes after injection. Natural death for someone in his condition. I'll do it during the reception when everyone's distracted." She hung up. Then she dressed me. Like a corpse. "Even dead, you'll look good in photos," she said, straightening my tie with fingers that had just signed my death warrant. She kissed my forehead with lips that felt like Arctic ice. Then she showed Rick the syringe, hidden in her wedding purse. The second her car cleared the gates, I sat up. Tomorrow, she thinks she's murdering a vegetable at our vow renewal. Instead, she's walking into her own funeral. Security has every angle covered. Isla walked through the door before I could even stretch my neck. Irving Appleby followed, with 3 security guys carrying hard drives and tablets. Barrett Gibson came last, a leather folder thick with documents. Irving set up a laptop on the nightstand, pulling up camera feeds of Elena's departure. The audio files were already organized by date, timestamps marking every conversation about murder. Barrett opened his folder. Criminal complaints, ready to file, attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, theft. Crispin and McCoy had signed off on arrest warrants, just waiting for Elena to actually try the injection. Melissa Appleby had frozen the offshore accounts 3 hours ago, using emergency court orders. Elena thought she had $43 million hidden, but it was all locked down, waiting for asset seizure. The team ran through the final checklist while I headed to the bathroom. For months of lying, still had done more damage than I expected, even with the secret physical therapy. My muscles worked, but everything felt stiff and strange. The shower helped wash away the hospital smell and the feeling of helplessness. I stood under hot water for 20 minutes, working out the tension in my shoulders. Barrett knocked. Crispin was positioned at the courthouse, ready to move. Melissa confirmed every financial trap was set. The dress clothes Elena had picked out were still hanging in the closet. Black suit. Like I was already dead. I put on my actual wedding suit instead. Navy blue, custom-tailored, the one I wore 5 years ago, before I knew what she was. Irving came in while I was fixing my tie, pulling up the venue security grid on his tablet. 40 cameras hidden in flower arrangements, ceiling fixtures, decorative panels. Microphones in Elena's bouquet would catch every word. Her purse had a tracker and a camera pointing up at her face. 500 guests would be watched by 20 plainclothes security personnel, scattered through the crowd. The instant Elena reached for that syringe, 6 people would move to intercept. Irving showed me the sight lines, the backup positions. Barrett had coordinated with Crispin to have uniformed officers outside in unmarked cars. My mother arrived 2 hours before the ceremony. She walked into my bedroom and saw me standing there, fully dressed and healthy. Her face crumpled. She grabbed me in a hug that hurt my ribs. She cried for 5 minutes. I just held her. She kept saying she was sorry for not stopping it sooner. I told her the performance had to be complete or Elena would have suspected. She pulled back, wiped her eyes. She said watching Elena abuse me while pretending to care was worse than anything she'd experienced. But she understood. Total authenticity mattered. The evidence needed to be perfect. Isla came in with her tablet, showing Elena's morning timeline. 6 a.m. Wake up, call to Rick confirming the plan. 7:30. Practicing her sad widow face in the bathroom mirror. 8:15. Checking morphine dosage calculations for the 3rd time, like she was cramming for a test. 9 a.m. Final purse check, making sure the syringe was accessible. 10 a.m. Hair and makeup. 11 a.m. She'd be arriving at the venue. Everything was proceeding exactly as Elena had planned. Except, I wasn't actually paralyzed anymore. Guests started showing up at noon. Old friends, business associates, distant relatives who thought they were attending a touching vow renewal ceremony. Barrett positioned himself 3 rows from the front, Crispin sitting next to him, dressed like a cousin nobody remembered. Both ready to move fast. Irving confirmed all cameras were recording. The security team, looking like regular guests, spread through the crowd. Nobody knew they were attending a trap instead of a wedding. The venue coordinator wheeled me to the altar at 1:45. I kept my eyes closed, my body completely limp. The wheelchair felt different now that I was choosing to sit in it. Irving's voice came through the tiny earpiece hidden in my ear canal. Elena had just pulled up. She was checking her makeup in the car. Her hand went to her purse, confirming the syringe was there. She took 3 deep breaths, like an actress preparing for a performance. Then, she got out and walked toward the venue entrance. The ceremony music started at 2 p.m. exactly. I heard Elena's heels clicking on the stone path. She came up behind my wheelchair, put her hands on the handles. Her performance started immediately. I heard her voice breaking as she spoke to the officiant about how meaningful this renewal was. Several guests were already crying at her dedication. She wheeled me down the aisle slowly, her hand resting on my shoulder, the same hand that had slapped my face hard enough to make my ears ring. I used everything I had learned over 4 months to stay completely limp. My breathing stayed shallow, regular. My face showed nothing. The officiant began the ceremony. Elena delivered her prepared speech. She talked about eternal love, staying devoted through sickness and health. Her voice broke at perfect moments. I watched through barely opened eyes as she positioned herself next to my wheelchair. She was setting up access to my feet, the injection site she'd chosen, between my toes, where nobody would check. The officiant asked if she took me as her husband, and she said yes, tears streaming down her face. The ceremony concluded. She leaned down to kiss my forehead. Those cold lips touched my skin one last time. Then she grabbed the wheelchair handles and started pushing me toward the reception area, the champagne toast, where she planned to commit murder while everyone was distracted. Irving confirmed through my earpiece that all cameras were recording. Crispin had his hand on the arrest warrant. Barrett was moving into position. Elena wheeled me to a spot near the back corner of the reception tent, where white tablecloths covered round tables and champagne glasses waited on silver trays. She parked the wheelchair at an angle that gave her access to my feet while keeping me away from the main crowd. I watched through barely open eyes as she smoothed her wedding dress and walked toward the first group of guests. Her face transformed into a perfect grief, mixed with joy as an older couple hugged her, telling her how brave she was. She touched her heart, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I counted the seconds until she checked her watch. 45 seconds passed before she glanced at her wrist again. Irving's voice came through my earpiece, confirming all cameras were recording her movements. She worked the room like a professional actress, making sure every guest saw her devoted wife performance. She accepted hugs and whispers, sympathetic touches. Every few minutes, her eyes darted to the wheelchair to confirm I was still sitting there, helpless. Barrett stood 3 tables away, pretending to look at his phone, but I knew he was watching Elena, tracking her murder timeline. The guests flowed around the reception space, drinking champagne and eating appetizers. Nobody knew they were attending a trap instead of a celebration. Elena moved from group to group, her hand constantly going to her purse where the syringe waited. She checked her watch again. 30 seconds this time. The ceremony had taken longer than she planned, and now she was getting nervous about her timeline. Rick walked through the entrance at 2:45. Elena's entire face changed in a way I'd never seen before. Her eyes lit up. Her mouth formed a genuine smile that reached all the way to her cheeks. She moved toward him fast, and he kissed her on the mouth, not the cheek, like you'd expect at someone else's wedding. His hand dropped to her stomach in a quick touch that looked casual, but I knew what it meant. He was checking on their baby, the child they thought would inherit everything I owned. Barrett's hand landed on my shoulder, squeezing once. The signal, wait. Don't move yet. Let her make the attempt. Rick stayed close to Elena as she introduced him to guests as my best friend since childhood. They laughed together at something someone said, his hand resting on the small of her back. I watched them through my eyelashes, remembering Rick and me at 12, building a treehouse in my backyard. The memory tasted like metal in my mouth. Elena checked her watch again, said something to Rick that made him nod. She excused herself, walking toward the bathroom tent they'd set up near the main entrance. Irving's voice confirmed through my earpiece, "She just entered the bathroom." Melissa's voice came next, tight, "This is it." Elena was removing the syringe from her purse. She was checking the dosage markings, practicing the injection angle with her thumb on the plunger. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I kept my breathing steady and shallow. For months of practice made the paralyzed act automatic now. Barrett's hand squeezed my shoulder again. Irving confirmed Elena was leaving the bathroom, the syringe concealed in her right palm. She came back into the reception tent, smiling at guests, accepting more congratulations. The syringe stayed hidden in her hand, pressed against her leg as she walked. Rick moved into position near my wheelchair without being obvious. He stood at an angle that blocked the sight line from most guests. They'd planned this part carefully in their recorded phone calls. Elena reached my wheelchair and knelt down beside me, like a concerned wife checking on her invalid husband. Her left hand touched the blanket covering my legs while her right hand moved toward my foot. I could see the syringe now, positioned between her fingers exactly like she'd practiced. She pulled the blanket back slightly to expose my ankle. Her fingers found the space between my toes, where she planned to inject. The needle touched my skin. I felt the cold metal point press against me. My eyes snapped open. Full. My hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with perfect strength. I looked directly into her face and said, clearly enough for everyone nearby to hear me speak for the first time in 4 months, "Hello, Elena." Her face went through 3 expressions in maybe 2 seconds. First, shock, because vegetables don't grab wrists. Then, confusion, because nothing made sense anymore. Then, horror, as she understood what just happened. I stood up from the wheelchair, using muscles that worked perfectly fine and had been working fine this whole time. The reception tent went completely silent. 500 guests stopped talking, turning to watch me standing there, holding my wife's wrist. She was holding a syringe full of morphine, meant to kill me in 20 minutes. Barrett signaled to Crispin, who started moving toward us from his position near the bar. Elena tried to drop the syringe, but my grip on her wrist was iron. Irving and 2 security team members appeared from different directions. Irving took the syringe carefully, using a clear evidence bag. Crispin reached us, announcing in a voice that carried across the tent that he was the district attorney, and Elena was under arrest for attempted murder. Rick tried to run toward the exit, but security blocked every door. My mother stepped forward from where she was standing with her friends. She told the guests, in a calm voice, that they had just witnessed the prevention of a murder. I addressed the crowd, my voice steady, explaining that for 4 months, I had pretended to be paralyzed to document my wife's true intentions. The security team started displaying video footage on screens they'd set up around the tent. The guests watched Elena talking to Rick about inheriting my empire through their baby. They watched her researching poison doses on my laptop. They watched her meeting with the hospice consultant about morphine protocols. They watched her calling Dean to confirm she had 15 milligrams ready for injection. The screens showed Elena having sex with Rick in my bed while I lay there, supposedly paralyzed, 2 feet away. They showed her slapping my face, laughing about vegetables not needing dignity. Guest faces turned from shock to disgust as 4 months of documented betrayal played out. Elena started screaming that I couldn't prove anything, even though she was surrounded by cameras, witnesses, and still holding the syringe with her fingerprints all over it. Crispin read her rights from a card he pulled from his jacket pocket. 2 officers put handcuffs on her wrists, and she was still wearing the $100,000 wedding dress she'd bought to wear while murdering me. Rick got handcuffed, too. Crispin announced conspiracy to commit murder charges against him. The guests reacted in waves. Some screamed, others started crying. An older man near the back bent over, throwing up his champagne and appetizers onto the grass. A woman fainted. My mother took control, raising her voice, asking everyone to remain there because police would need statements. Barrett's legal team moved through the crowd with tablets and recording devices to process 500 witness accounts. Elena and Rick were walked towards separate police vehicles that had pulled up outside the tent. Elena screamed about her lawyer and her rights, her wedding dress train dragging through the grass. Rick stayed quiet, his head down, as they put him in the back of a different car. The vehicles drove away, lights flashing. I was left standing in the middle of my vow renewal reception that had become the most public arrest anyone here would ever witness. Barrett's team spent the next hour taking statements. I sat in a private room they set up away from the tent, waiting for the investigators to finish processing the scene. Crispin brought in 2 detectives and a recording device around 4 in the afternoon. They asked me to walk them through everything from the beginning. I started with the car accident 4 months ago. I explained the code silver text to Isla, how we assembled 50 paid actors within hours. The detectives took notes while I described every detail of Elena's behavior during my fake paralysis. I showed them timestamps for when she slapped me, when she had sex with Rick in my bed, when she researched poison doses on my laptop. The head detective kept shaking his head, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I walked them through the financial theft that Melissa documented, 40 million moving to offshore accounts in careful increments. I explained how Elena got me declared incompetent using the same doctors I'd paid to fake my diagnosis. The pregnancy came up. I described how she waved the positive test in my face, telling me it was Rick's baby. I detailed the hospice consultant meeting where Elena took notes about lethal morphine doses. The investigators asked about the vow renewal planning, and I explained how she booked everything while planning to kill me during the reception. I showed them the recording of her phone call to Dean, confirming she had 15 milligrams ready for injection between my toes. 6 hours passed. I gave them every piece of evidence we'd collected. Crispin told the detectives this was the most completely documented attempted murder case he'd ever seen. The evidence was so strong, conviction was basically guaranteed. The detectives agreed, packing up their equipment. By the time we finished, it was almost 10 at night. I was exhausted from reliving 4 months of abuse in one sitting. Barrett pulled me aside. The story already broke nationally, he said. You can't arrest someone at their vow renewal with 500 witnesses without it hitting the news. His PR team had put out a statement an hour ago, confirming basic facts, trying to protect my privacy. I knew that was impossible now. This whole thing was too public, too crazy for anyone to ignore. Barrett showed me his phone. Articles were already up on major news sites. Billionaire fakes paralysis to catch wife planning murder. Some painted me as a genius. Others, a sociopath who enjoyed watching his wife betray him. Barrett told me to avoid all media and let the evidence speak for itself. I agreed. I didn't want to explain this to reporters who weren't there. My life would never be private again. I knew it. The wedding venue staff started breaking down the tent. Police finished their work. Isla found me around 11. I'm taking you home, she said. I realized I hadn't been to my actual bedroom in 4 months. We drove through the gates, and photographers were already camped outside. Security kept them back while we pulled into the garage. Isla walked me upstairs to my real bedroom. It felt strange to be in this space again. She checked all the security systems. Get some sleep, she said. I collapsed into bed. I didn't wake up for 16 hours straight. Security monitored all entrances while I slept harder than I had in months. When I finally woke up the next afternoon, my phone had hundreds of messages. From people I hadn't talked to in years. Everyone suddenly wanted to check on me, now that the drama was public. Old college friends, distant relatives, business contacts. Most of the messages were the same. Shocked, are you okay? A few admitted they never liked Elena, but couldn't explain why. I didn't respond to any of them. I wasn't ready. Barrett called around 3 that afternoon. Rick's family had contacted him, begging for a meeting. They claimed they had no idea about Rick's involvement. They wanted to understand what happened to their son. I told Barrett, refuse all contact. I'm not ready to hear excuses. Watching my best friend since we were 12 betray me was, somehow, worse than Elena's calculated cruelty. At least Elena married me for money, so her betrayal made sense, in a twisted way. Rick threw away decades of friendship for a chance at billions and a baby that wasn't even planned. Barrett said he'd tell them I wasn't interested. He mentioned Elena's lawyer tried to negotiate bail that morning. Crispin argued she was a flight risk. 40 million in offshore accounts, resources to disappear. The judge agreed. Elena stayed in county jail, wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of designer clothes, experiencing powerlessness for the first time. Rick made bail through his parents, who took out a mortgage on their house. I felt a small satisfaction knowing Elena couldn't manipulate anyone or play her victim role. She was just another inmate. Over the next few days, Melissa completed the financial analysis. Elena took 43 million over 4 months through shell companies and offshore transfers. Melissa tracked every transaction, finding patterns showing Elena had been setting this up for at least a year before the car accident. The shell companies were created months before we even got in that car. Barrett filed civil suits to recover everything, plus damages. The evidence was so clear we'd get most of it back. Learning she'd been planning this for over a year hits different. She married me, already planning to steal from me, probably kill me. The whole relationship was a setup from the beginning. The investigation continued. Crispin called Barrett with new information about the car accident. They brought in a mechanic who examined what was left of my car. Evidence showed someone tampered with the brakes. Elena had paid someone to cut the brake lines, planning to kill me in what would look like an accident. When I survived, she switched to the long-term murder plan. Crispin added attempted vehicular homicide to the charges against Elena. Her potential sentence just went from 20 years to life. Barrett said this proved everything was premeditated. She wanted me dead one way or another. The car accident was supposed to be the easy solution. The brake tampering evidence made the whole case even stronger. A few days later, Dean contacted Barrett, offering to testify against Elena. He claimed Elena discussed getting rid of me months before the accident, though he said he thought she meant divorce. His testimony helped establish premeditation and planning, strengthening the case significantly. Dean was trying to distance himself from any conspiracy charges. Barrett thought Dean probably knew more than he was admitting, but his testimony was valuable. Crispin agreed to meet with Dean. I didn't care about Dean's motivations. I just wanted Elena convicted. After 2 weeks of dealing with investigators and lawyers, I went back to my office. I hadn't been there in 4 months. I needed to see how the company handled my absence. Isla drove me downtown. We took the private elevator up. My team treated me like I was returning from war. Everyone wanted to shake my hand, tell me how glad they were that I was safe. Isla briefed me on operations. Everything continued smoothly. Quarterly numbers were up. I realized the company never needed me present every day the way I thought it did. My executives were capable. That was both reassuring and a little humbling. Barrett called me back to his office the next week to discuss the pregnancy complication. California law gives children certain rights, regardless of conception. Elena's baby might have claims to my estate if she could argue we were married when she got pregnant. The timing was tricky. We were legally married during her affair with Rick. Barrett warned me that Rick's baby could inherit from me unless we invalidated the marriage based on fraud and criminal actions. We started legal proceedings immediately. Barrett filed motions arguing that Elena's criminal conduct and fraudulent intentions voided the marriage contract. The pregnancy added a whole new layer of legal complexity I hadn't anticipated. I never thought I'd be fighting to make sure my best friend's baby with my wife didn't inherit my fortune. Barrett assured me the fraud case was strong enough to invalidate everything, but it would take time. Elena's lawyer would fight it because that baby was her last chance at my money. I signed all the paperwork Barrett put in front of me, trying not to think about how twisted this had become. 3 weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings. Then Barrett called. Elena's lawyers want a plea deal. 20 years for attempted murder instead of risking life in prison. Barrett slid the offer across his desk. I stared at the numbers. Crispin, sitting in the corner, explained that 20 years was a good deal from the prosecution's perspective. It guaranteed conviction without the risk of jury sympathy. Some juries see a crying woman and forget about the syringe full of morphine. I picked up the paper, set it down 3 times. Part of me wanted to watch Elena squirm on the witness stand while prosecutors played every recording of her planning my death. The other part just wanted this finished, so I could stop reliving those 4 months every time I saw her lawyer's name in my inbox. Barrett leaned forward. What do you want to do? I didn't know. The satisfaction of a trial might feel good for a few weeks, but 20 guaranteed years meant she was locked away. I signed the paper, agreeing to support the plea deal. Barrett nodded, like I'd made the right choice, even though neither of us knew if that was true. Barrett insisted I see a therapist before I left his office. He had someone lined up. I took the card. I wanted to argue, but the nightmares had started a few days ago. I showed up at 9. She was older, with gray hair, kind eyes. No small talk. She asked me to describe the 4 months. I gave her the basic facts, without much detail. She stopped me when I got to Elena slapping me. How did you manage to stay still through that? She asked. I just did, I said. She shook her head. She explained that staying motionless while someone abuses you requires something called dissociation, where your brain disconnects from your body to protect itself. The problem is, dissociation doesn't just turn off when the danger ends. Your brain learns that disconnecting keeps you safe, and starts doing it automatically, even when you don't need it anymore. The nightmares, she said, are your brain trying to process trauma it couldn't handle in real time. In the dreams, I'm actually paralyzed and Elena comes with a syringe and I can't move or scream. I wake up frozen in bed, unable to move for several seconds until my brain remembers the paralysis was fake. The therapist scheduled me for twice a week. I agreed. The nightmares were getting worse. Rick's lawyer contacted Barrett 2 days after Elena's plea offer with a separate deal. Barrett called me from his car, disgust in his voice. Rick claimed Elena manipulated him, that he didn't fully understand the murder plan. His lawyer argued Rick was a victim of Elena's schemes, just like me. Barrett asked if I wanted to hear the recorded conversations where Rick explicitly discussed inheriting my wealth through his baby with Elena. I said no. I already knew what was on those recordings. Rick talked about billions while having sex in my bed, 2 feet from my supposedly paralyzed body. He knew exactly what he was doing. His lawyer's manipulation defense was pathetic. Crispin rejected the offer within an hour. Barrett told me Rick would probably end up with 15 to 20 years for conspiracy and accessory charges. I felt nothing. Rick stopped being my friend the moment he touched Elena. No plea deal changed that. My mother called, asked if she could come over that evening. She sounded tired. I knew something was wrong before she even arrived. She sat on my couch. I've been seeing my own therapist, she admitted. Twice a week since the vow renewal. Watching Elena abuse me while she pretended to be a concerned mother had damaged something in her she couldn't explain. She had to act supportive while Elena counted days until my death. Smile at Elena's performance while knowing every word was a lie. My mother said she was proud I protected myself, but she wished I'd found a way that didn't require 4 months of torture for both of us. She started crying. This was the first honest conversation we'd had since I sat up from that wheelchair. The deception created this weird intimacy between us, where we shared something horrible that nobody else could understand. We both watched Elena's true nature emerge and had to stay silent while she planned murder. My mother said her therapist was helping her process the anger she felt about what I put us both through. Even though she knew why I did it, I apologized for involving her. She waved it off, but I could see the damage in her eyes. Some things can't be fixed with apologies. The media situation exploded the next week when someone leaked selected recordings of Elena discussing the murder plan. I was eating breakfast when Isla called, telling me to avoid all news sites and social media. Too late. I'd already opened my phone. My face was on every major outlet. The recordings turned Elena into a national villain, and me into either a genius who outsmarted a killer or a sociopath who tortured his wife for 4 months, depending on which outlet you read. Half the country thought I was a hero. The other half thought I was sick for letting the abuse continue when I could have ended it earlier. Barrett called an hour later, advised me to avoid media. Any statement I made would just feed the circus. I deleted my social media apps, stopped reading news sites, but I still heard about it from everyone who called. My assistant showed me a poll. 60% supported my actions, 40% thought I was as bad as Elena. I threw my phone across the room. Isla quietly picked it up, didn't mention the cracked screen. Melissa called with an update on the offshore account recovery the same week the media circus peaked. She managed to freeze 41 of the 43 million Elena stole, but 2 million disappeared into some cryptocurrency that might never be recovered. Elena's lawyer immediately filed a motion arguing she needed those frozen funds for her defense. Barrett laughed when he forwarded me the motion. The argument was basically that Elena should be allowed to use stolen money to defend herself against theft charges. The judge ruled within 2 days, stolen assets could not be used. Elena's accounts remained frozen. Melissa explained this meant Elena would have a public defender instead of the expensive legal team she planned to hire with my money. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Barrett said this significantly improved our chances at trial if the plea deal fell through. I drove out to the private hospital wing the next morning, standing in the parking lot, staring at the building where I'd spent 4 months being abused. The facility cost $12 million to build, but I couldn't stand knowing it existed with all those memories embedded in the walls. I called a demolition company. I want the entire structure gone within a month. The crew supervisor thought I was crazy when he saw a pristine medical facility. I didn't explain. He didn't ask questions when I authorized payment for immediate demolition. Isla tried to talk me out of it, explaining the facility's value. But I needed it gone more than I needed $12 million. Watching the wrecking ball hit that building 2 weeks later provided more satisfaction than any therapy session. The crew hauled away the rubble, planted grass. I could finally drive past that spot without feeling sick. Dean provided his testimony to investigators the same week the demolition finished. Barrett forwarded me the transcript. I read it in my car. Dean admitted Elena showed him the prenup years ago, discussing how disability would void the agreement, giving her access to my full wealth. He claimed he thought she was just complaining, not planning anything. Investigators didn't believe his ignorance act, but his testimony proved the car accident was always meant to either kill me or disable me. The brake tampering wasn't some panicked backup plan. Elena researched the prenup loopholes years before the accident. Crispin added this testimony to his case file. Premeditation charges are solid, he told Barrett. Elena didn't snap. She spent years planning. 6 weeks after the arrest, Crispin presented the complete case to a grand jury for indictment. Barrett and I sat in his office while Crispin texted updates. The grand jury indicted Elena on attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, vehicular assault, theft, fraud, and 6 other charges. Rick received conspiracy charges and accessory to attempted murder. Both faced decades in prison, even with plea deals. Crispin called Barrett. They discussed trial timelines. I sat there feeling nothing. The charges were expected. The evidence overwhelming. But none of it changed the fact that I spent 4 months being tortured by someone I loved. Legal victories don't erase trauma. Indictments don't give me back the trust one lost. Elena's lawyer sent a letter the next week. She wanted to write me an apology as part of a potential plea negotiation. Barrett brought it to my office. Want to read it? He asked. Burn it, I said. Without showing me. I didn't want her words, her excuses. Any apology at this point was just strategy. Barrett nodded. Elena had 4 months to apologize while planning my murder. She spent that time having sex with my best friend. Her words meant nothing now that she faced prison. The only thing I wanted from Elena was distance. Rick's parents showed up at my office 2 days later, demanding to see me. Security called from the lobby. I told them to escort them out. But they made it to my floor. Rick's mother pushed past my assistant, burst into my office. His father stood in the doorway, looking broken. She started screaming that I destroyed her son's life, that I set him up for my sick game. Her face was red, spit flew. She called me a manipulator. Security grabbed her arms, but she kept shouting that Rick was a good boy. He made one mistake. You ruined him because you couldn't accept Elena never loved you. His father just cried, shaking his head, while 2 guards dragged his wife backward toward the elevators. She screamed I was the real criminal all the way down the hall. Isla found me 20 minutes later, still at my desk, my hands shaking. She didn't say anything, just sat across from me while I stared at the wall. Part of me knew Rick's mother was right. Even though Rick made his own choices, I did set up an elaborate trap. But he walked into it willingly when he decided to sleep with my wife in my bed. Isla eventually asked if I wanted to cancel my afternoon meetings. I said no. Stopping would mean admitting the confrontation affected me. The therapist's office became my weekly routine. She never judged. During our 4th session, she explained I was experiencing complex trauma, sustained abuse combined with betrayal by the 2 people I trusted most. Recovery would take years. I'd struggle with trust. The diagnosis made sense, but hearing it out loud felt like Elena won. Even in jail, she damaged me permanently. The therapist asked if the deception was worth it. I couldn't answer. I didn't know anymore. I protected my wealth. I proved Elena's intentions. But the cost was 4 months of torture that left scars I'd carry forever. She said that was normal. Part of processing trauma was accepting some victories come with permanent costs. I paid her $300, drove home feeling more broken than before I arrived. 3 months after the arrest, Barrett called. Elena's lawyer reached out. She would accept 25 years for attempted murder. Crispin recommended I accept. Trials are unpredictable. Rick's lawyer made a similar offer, 15 years for conspiracy. Barrett laid out both deals. I looked at the papers, describing decades of prison time for 2 people I once loved. I felt nothing except tired. Accepting the deals meant no trial, no public testimony, no media circus. It meant certainty instead of risk. After everything, I wanted certainty more than revenge. I signed the acceptance documents. Barrett filed them. Crispin called an hour later, confirming both Elena and Rick accepted. Sentencing was scheduled within the week. The courthouse was packed for Elena's sentencing. I sat in the front row with Barrett. Elena was led in, orange jumpsuit, handcuffs. Thin and pale. Nothing like the woman who used to practice her concerned face in my hospital room. The judge asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement. I stood up, holding papers I'd written the night before. I described 4 months of systematic abuse, completely helpless, watching my wife conduct affairs in my bed, plan my murder. I explained the psychological torture of hearing her discuss injection sites, lethal doses, while sitting on my paralyzed legs. The judge listened without expression. Elena stared at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. I described the humiliation of being used as a footrest by strangers. The wine she spilled on my face. The photos she took for her private collection. When I finished, the judge acknowledged my deception was legally questionable but understandable. She sentenced Elena to 25 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. Bailiffs led her away. She finally looked at me with empty eyes. Rick's sentencing happened 3 days later. His parents sat across the aisle. His mother glared at me. Rick looked worse than Elena. The judge asked if I wanted to give another statement. I stood up with different papers. I described 30 years of friendship destroyed by greed and betrayal. Watching my best friend choose billions over loyalty. I explained the specific pain of his affair with Elena in my bed, 2 feet away. Listening to them plan my death. Rick cried openly, but I felt no sympathy. He made every choice that led to this moment. The judge sentenced him to 15 years. His mother screamed that I was destroying families. His father had to restrain her. I left through the back exit. The divorce was finalized within days. Barrett filed emergency motions to invalidate the marriage. The judge approved everything. Elena got nothing. No settlement, no alimony. Melissa recovered 39 of the 43 million Elena stole. $4 million disappeared into crypto. Barrett said we'd pursue it, but I told him to let it go. I was done chasing Elena's theft. The marriage was invalidated like it never existed. It should have felt like victory, but it felt hollow. 3 months into her sentence, Elena lost the baby. Miscarriage. Prison medical unit. Barrett asked if I wanted details. I said no. The baby was never mine. The whole situation destroyed something in me I couldn't get back. No amount of legal victories or prison sentences would restore what Elena took during those 4 months. Isla suggested an extended vacation. The company would survive without me. I needed distance. I booked 2 months, traveling alone. Iceland, empty and cold. Small villages in Japan, where language barriers meant no conversations about my life. Hiking mountains in New Zealand. Sitting on beaches in Thailand, watching waves, trying to remember who I was before the deception. The anonymity helped me breathe. I met other travelers, gave simple answers. But even in those quiet moments, I realized I could never fully return to the person I was before Elena. The experience changed something fundamental in how I saw people, relationships. No amount of distance would erase those 4 months. I returned home, began rebuilding my life with new security protocols. Irving installed more cameras. Updated access codes. Every person entering my home or office went through enhanced background checks. Multiple levels of approval for anyone new in my inner circle. The protocols made every interaction exhausting. I was constantly evaluating motives, watching for deception. Irving sat me down. See fewer people, trust your instincts more. But my instincts failed me completely with Elena. Trusting them felt impossible. I hired more security staff. The measures were probably excessive, but I needed them to feel safe. Nobody questioned my paranoia after what I'd endured. My mother and I established new boundaries. The deception created an intimacy through shared trauma that neither of us wanted. We used to have weekly dinners. Now they were strained. She'd ask how I was. I'd say fine. We both knew I was lying, but neither of us wanted to dig deeper. After a month of forced conversations, I suggested changing weekly dinners to monthly check-ins. She looked relieved. We both acknowledged we needed space. It worked better. The company thrived. My executive team proved they could operate independently. Isla coordinated everything during the deception and during my recovery. I recognized her loyalty was worth more than any salary. I promoted her to partner, gave her significant equity. She cried. She never expected recognition for just doing her job. I explained her job during those 4 months was protecting my life and sanity. That deserved permanent acknowledgement. The partnership made her a true equal. 6 months after Elena's sentencing, I started dating again. My therapist suggested it was time. The fear of being fooled again was terrifying. I met someone at a charity event. She didn't know my story. Seemed genuinely interested in conversation, not my wealth. We went on 3 dates before I told her about Elena. She listened without judgment or pity. But even as we dated, I struggled with paranoia. Analyzing word choices, inconsistencies. I hired a private investigator. Then felt guilty. The therapist helped me understand not everyone was Elena. But the fear of being fooled again made vulnerability nearly impossible. I sabotaged the relationship after 2 months, pushing her away with constant suspicion. 8 months after Elena's sentencing, I sat in Barrett's office, signing papers to establish the foundation. The legal documents took 3 hours. My hand cramped from signing 47 times. Isla found office space in downtown San Francisco, accessible, private. We hired 6 staff members who understood trauma because they'd lived through it. Survivors who could look clients in the eye and mean it when they said things would get better. The foundation offered legal aid, financial counseling, emergency housing, therapy referrals to anyone trapped in dangerous relationships. I transferred $5 million from my personal accounts. Committed to matching donations. The work felt important in ways my business never had. Helping people who couldn't hire 50 actors and security teams. We opened in October. 37 clients by December. Mostly women, but some men too. Stories of manipulation, financial control that sounded familiar. I spent 2 days a week at the foundation. The work exhausted me in ways that felt productive. One woman cried when we paid her security deposit for a new apartment. I understood that my 4 months of hell had purchased the ability to change her life. The foundation gave me purpose beyond accumulating wealth. Helped me process my own victimization by preventing others from experiencing the same thing. By spring, we'd helped 83 people. Rick's parents sent a letter through Barrett's office in March, 6 months after their son went to prison. The envelope sat on my desk for 2 weeks. Seeing their names made my stomach hurt. His mother wrote 3 pages, explaining they'd spent months trying to understand how their son became someone capable of conspiracy to murder. She admitted they'd always known Rick envied my success, but never imagined that envy could twist into something murderous. His father added a paragraph, accepting responsibility for not teaching Rick better values, for raising a son who saw friendship as transactional. They acknowledged Rick's choices destroyed a friendship that dated back to middle school. They understood if I never wanted contact again. The letter felt genuine, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The wound of Rick's betrayal still felt too fresh. I filed the letter in my desk drawer. Told Barrett to inform them I appreciated the gesture, but needed more time. The therapist said my inability to respond was normal. I didn't owe them forgiveness or closure. Some wounds take years. 1 year after the confrontation, the therapist suggested I visit Elena in prison to gain closure. I fought the idea for 3 weeks. Seeing her face again felt dangerous. But the therapist explained that confronting her in a controlled environment might help me process the trauma. Barrett arranged the visit. I drove to the women's facility, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Security processed me. I was escorted to a visiting room. Elena walked in, orange jumpsuit, 20 pounds lighter. Hollow and broken. Dark circles under her eyes. She sat across from me, immediately started crying, reaching for my hands. The guard told her no physical contact. She said she never meant to actually kill me, just fantasizing about being free. Didn't understand how serious her planning had become. I watched her perform remorse. The same way she'd performed grief. I saw through the manipulation immediately. She claimed the pregnancy loss devastated her. But her eyes stayed calculating. I listened for exactly 10 minutes, without saying a word. Then stood up and walked out while she called my name. The guard escorted me back. I drove home, feeling nothing but relief that she was contained. The therapist was right about closure. Seeing Elena powerless confirmed I'd escaped something that would have destroyed me. I stopped having nightmares about her within a month. I sold the Napa estate in June. Couldn't separate the property from the memories of that day. The real estate agent showed it to 12 buyers. A tech entrepreneur offered asking price. The new owners had no idea about the history. I didn't tell them. That story belonged to me. The sale netted $42 million after taxes. I immediately transferred $30 million to the foundation's endowment fund. The remaining $12 million went to establishing scholarships for children of incarcerated parents. Kids who didn't choose their situations, but suffered the consequences. Barrett handled the paperwork. The estate transferred ownership in August. I never went back. Some places become permanent crime scenes in your memory. The foundation staff threw a small celebration when the endowment cleared. $30 million meant we could expand services, help hundreds more. Melissa called me into her office in September. Information that made Elena's betrayal somehow less personal. Her forensic team had been tracking Elena's digital footprint. Discovered correspondence with 2 other wealthy men during our marriage. Elena had been running similar long-term manipulation schemes with both of them. Sending flirty messages, discussing their finances, building backup plans in case I didn't work out. One man, a real estate developer. The other, a venture capitalist. Both had significant wealth. Both received the same calculated attention Elena gave me. Melissa showed me message threads. Elena researched their assets, discussed marriage prospects. Treating relationships like investment portfolios. The revelation that I was just one of several targets made the betrayal feel less like a personal failure. Elena hadn't chosen me specifically. She'd been running a numbers game, manipulating multiple wealthy men simultaneously until one of them worked out. The therapist helped me understand. This meant Elena's deception wasn't about me at all, just about opportunity and resources. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during my marriage. People I drifted away from because she always had reasons why we should skip their events. Rem from college invited me to his daughter's birthday party. I went. Spent an afternoon with people who remembered me before the wealth and drama. Sarah from my first startup threw a dinner party, seated me next to normal people. Both Rem and Sarah admitted over drinks they never liked Elena, but couldn't articulate why. Rem said she always seemed to be performing. Sarah mentioned Elena asked too many questions about finances. Conversations that felt like interviews. Their honesty about sensing something wrong made me feel less foolish for missing the signs. The therapist said my friend saw Elena from the outside. I experienced her calculated intimacy. Those perspectives revealed different things. I couldn't have known. Elena showed me a completely different person. That deception was intentional and skilled. My weekly therapy sessions in October focused on understanding what Elena actually was. The therapist explained Elena likely had antisocial personality disorder, commonly called sociopathy. She saw people as resources to exploit. Sociopaths are skilled at mimicking emotions, building relationships based on what others want to see. But they lack genuine empathy. No amount of vigilance would have revealed Elena's true nature without the extreme circumstances of the deception. She was performing a character specifically designed to fool me. The therapist showed me research on financial predators. Elena's behavior matched perfectly. She'd studied me, identified what I wanted, and became that person until she had access to resources worth stealing. The realization didn't erase my trust issues, but helped me stop blaming myself. Even trained professionals struggle to identify sociopaths. Understanding Elena as a predator shifted something in my recovery. 2 years after the confrontation, I met someone at the Foundation's annual fundraising gala. She ran a nonprofit supporting domestic violence survivors. Knew my whole story because the Foundation's work had been covered extensively. We talked for an hour. She never once asked about my wealth or Elena's crimes. Her name was Jennifer. She'd survived an abusive marriage herself. She understood hypervigilance and trust issues without taking them personally. We went on 3 dates before I asked Barrett to run a complete background check. Jennifer laughed when I told her. She said she'd probably do the same. Appreciated my honesty. Barrett's investigation found nothing concerning. Jennifer was exactly who she claimed to be. We dated slowly, carefully. I constantly monitored for red flags that never appeared. Jennifer understood some conversations triggered me. She met my mother after 6 months. Isla after 8. Both cautiously approved. The relationship felt different from Elena. Jennifer never performed or calculated. She got frustrated with me sometimes and said so directly. She had her own money, career, life. 5 years after the confrontation, I received notice that Rick was eligible for parole. Barrett explained I could submit a statement or testify. I spent 2 weeks deciding. Part of me wanted Rick to stay in prison forever. Another part remembered the friend he'd been before Elena corrupted him. I chose to testify. Drove to the correctional facility. The parole board sat behind a long table. Rick entered, prison blues, looking older and thinner. I gave my statement without looking at him. Explained honestly that Rick made terrible choices that destroyed a friendship. He participated in planning my murder, betrayed me in ways that still hurt 5 years later. But I also said the letters he'd sent seemed genuinely remorseful. I believed he understood the magnitude of what he'd done. I told the board I thought Rick deserved a chance at redemption eventually. The board asked questions about Rick's character before the crimes. I answered truthfully. He'd been a good friend for most of our lives. Rick was denied parole anyway, due to the severity of the conspiracy charges. I left feeling like I'd tried to do the right thing, even though our friendship was permanently destroyed. Rick would serve at least another 5 years. The foundation grew significantly. 6 staff to 23. Serving over 800 people annually. Satellite offices in 3 cities. Partnerships with law firms. The work became my primary focus. Consuming 30 hours a week. Most of my emotional energy. Elena's betrayal had created purpose I wouldn't have found otherwise. A mission more important than accumulating wealth. Each success story felt like reclaiming something Elena tried to take from me. Proof that her cruelty couldn't stop me from creating something meaningful. 3 years after Elena's sentencing, I bought a ring. Called my mother to arrange a small gathering. Jennifer knew something was happening. My mother set up her living room. Isla arrived early. Jennifer walked in expecting dinner. Found me standing in the center of the room, holding a small velvet box. I got down on one knee. Asked if she'd marry me. Explained I wanted something simple and real, not the performance Elena had demanded. Jennifer said yes. Hugged me while my mother cried happy tears. Isla took photos. The ring was smaller than Elena's. Jennifer had specifically told me she didn't want anything flashy. We sat on my mother's couch, planning a courthouse ceremony for the following month. I felt relief that this relationship involved actual conversations about what we both wanted. The courthouse wedding happened on a Tuesday morning. Just my mother, Isla, Jennifer's sister. A judge performed a 5-minute ceremony. Jennifer wore a simple blue dress. I wore a suit. The judge pronounced us married. We signed papers. My mother took us to lunch. We ate sandwiches, discussing normal topics. I realized I felt genuinely happy for the first time since before the car accident. Jennifer reached across the table, squeezed my hand when she noticed me getting quiet. She didn't ask what I was thinking about. She understood. We went home to our apartment, watched television. The lack of spectacle felt perfect. Our relationship existed in reality, not performance. Jennifer never expected me to prove my love through expensive gestures. A letter arrived from state prison 3 weeks after our wedding. Elena's name in the return address. I held it for 2 days. Jennifer noticed, but didn't ask. The letter was 4 pages of Elena's handwriting, explaining she'd found religion, wanted my forgiveness. She described attending chapel services, reading religious texts, claimed she finally understood greed had corrupted her soul. I read the entire letter while Jennifer made dinner. I felt absolutely nothing except mild curiosity. Did Elena actually believe what she'd written? The therapist had told me forgiveness was for my benefit. I could let go of anger without needing to reconcile. I put the letter in a drawer, told Jennifer about it, explained I wasn't ready to forgive, but wasn't consumed by hatred anymore. She listened, no advice, no judgment. Acknowledging my feelings about Elena were complicated. I never responded. Elena sent 2 more letters over the following year. I threw them away without opening. Irving called 6 months later, retiring after 30 years. We met for lunch. He explained the deception operation had been the culmination of his career. The most elaborate security operation he'd ever coordinated. He walked me through details I hadn't known. 200 hidden cameras. 24-hour monitoring. Irving admitted watching Elena abuse me had been harder than any protection detail. We talked about the ethical questions. Irving said he'd do it again. Protecting me from murder justified the deception. He became a mentor, helping me understand protecting yourself isn't paranoia when threats are real. Elena's betrayal taught me valuable lessons about trust and verification. His guidance helped me separate reasonable caution from the trust issues damaging my new marriage. For years after the confrontation, I took inventory. I was genuinely happy. My marriage to Jennifer was stable and honest. The company continued growing. I only worked 3 days a week now. The foundation had expanded. I still carried scars from Elena's betrayal, but they'd become part of my story instead of defining my identity. Jennifer and I hosted my mother for dinner every Sunday. Those evenings felt comfortable and real. The foundation work gave me purpose beyond accumulating wealth. I realized Elena's cruelty had accidentally created meaning, turning my trauma into something that protected others. The scars remained, but they'd transformed from open wounds into healed tissue. Jennifer told me she was pregnant on a random Thursday evening while we were doing dishes. Joy mixed with immediate terror. The therapist helped me understand parenting would trigger trauma responses related to Elena's fake pregnancy. But my awareness meant I could work through them consciously. I spent the pregnancy reading parenting books, attending classes with Jennifer, simultaneously working with Barrett to establish legal protections for our child. The baby arrived 7 months later. Complicated delivery. Holding my daughter for the first time brought overwhelming love mixed with fear. Jennifer watched me struggle, gave me space. The therapist increased our sessions to twice weekly during the first 3 months of parenting. Sleep deprivation, vulnerability, triggered panic attacks and intrusive thoughts. I established a trust for my daughter with ironclad protections. Jennifer reviewed the documents. Understood my caution came from experience. We laughed about the elaborate legal structures. The paperwork filled an entire binder. Included scenarios that seemed paranoid. but I needed those protections to feel secure enough to be present as a father. Jennifer recognized my trauma responses weren't personal attacks. She signed everything without complaint, even suggested additional safeguards. The legal protections let me relax enough to enjoy moments with my daughter. Barrett joked my daughter had better asset protection than most corporations. He understood. 5 years after Elena's sentencing, I woke up one morning. I hadn't had nightmares about being paralyzed in over 2 weeks. The dreams had been recurring. Always me paralyzed, Elena with the syringe. I couldn't speak or move. I mentioned the change to my therapist. She explained this represented genuine healing. My brain had finally processed what happened enough to stop replaying it. The nightmares had been decreasing. But this was the first extended period without them. I still had occasional anxiety about trust and betrayal. But the visceral terror of helplessness had faded. The therapist warned me anniversaries and triggers might bring them back. But the overall trajectory showed real progress. Jennifer noticed I was sleeping better. Said I'd stopped talking in my sleep. The improvement helped everything else feel more manageable. The foundation hosted its first annual gala 18 months later. I decided to share my story publicly for the first time. Isla had been pushing me. Jennifer encouraged me. Hundreds had already benefited. My story could help more. I worked with a speaking coach. The gala brought together 300 donors. I stood at the podium, told the story of pretending to be paralyzed to catch Elena, explained how that taught me about financial abuse. The room stayed silent. Several people cried. The vulnerability felt excruciating, but the response was overwhelmingly supportive. Dozens approached me afterward. We raised significant funds. Jennifer stood beside me, squeezed my hand when I started shaking. Sharing my story felt like reclaiming it from Elena, transforming private trauma into public good. Barrett contacted me 6 months later. News that Elena was eligible for parole in 15 years. I'd have the opportunity to testify. Jennifer asked if I'd oppose her release. I genuinely didn't know yet how I'd feel in 15 years. Part of me wanted Elena in prison forever. But another part wondered if keeping her imprisoned was justice or revenge. The therapist helped me understand I had 15 years to figure out whether revenge or mercy served me better. My feelings would evolve. Jennifer supported whatever decision I'd make, encouraged me to stay open to forgiveness. I filed paperwork preserving my right to testify, acknowledging I might not. Elena would serve at least 15 more years regardless. The knowledge that I had time felt freeing. I didn't need to commit to revenge or forgiveness immediately. 6 years after the vow renewal confrontation, I wake up in my new house. Sunlight through windows facing a garden my wife planted. She's downstairs making breakfast. I hear our daughter laughing. I head down, find them both covered in flour from attempting pancakes. My wife kisses me without checking her reflection first. The foundation office opens in an hour. I need to review the quarterly report. We helped 200 families escape dangerous relationships this year. My company stock hit record highs. I only work 3 days a week now. Therapy sessions dropped to once a month 2 years ago. The nightmares finally stopped. My daughter runs up, shows me a drawing. Just stick figures holding hands. She'll never know about Elena. The elaborate deception protected my wealth, exposed Elena's true nature. But it cost me 4 months of systematic abuse and years of recovery. I've made peace with that trade-off. The alternative was dying at my vow renewal or spending my life with someone who saw me as a resource to exploit. Later that evening, I stand in our living room, watching my wife help our daughter with homework. Isla texts about tomorrow's foundation gala. My mother calls to confirm Sunday dinner. These people have proven their loyalty through years of honest relationship, showing up consistently, without performing devotion or calculating what they can extract from me. Elena's betrayal taught me the difference between someone who practices concerned faces in mirrors and someone who actually gives a damn when you're struggling. The lesson cost more than I wanted to pay. For months of humiliation, years of therapy, trust issues that still surface when I meet new people. But it gave me the wisdom to recognize authentic love when I found it. To build a life with people who chose me for reasons beyond my bank account. To create something worth protecting that doesn't require security cameras and paid actors to verify its reality. I'm finally grateful for both the warning Elena provided and the survival that let me build this instead. What do you think? After everything I went through, would you have chosen to reveal the truth the way I did, or would you have walked away sooner? Let me know in the comments.